Hi Brian, this is Mashnu, and well, it's the second attempt to record this video because the previous one was not well synchronized. The sound and the image was not correct. So let's hope it works better this time. I don't know exactly what is causing this problem. Um, anyway, you sent me this game. You were playing white here. I find it a very interesting game. Not only because of how the game went, but also because of this fact that you are playing against an opponent who is lower rated than you are. And that's psychologically sometimes difficult because we get the pressure of having to win the game. And well, one of the advices that is given when we play against lower rated opponents, it's not to try to force anything, but simply to play a positional type of chess and wait until the opponent makes a mistake. And sooner or later he will create some weaknesses, and you can exploit that. That's let's say what the theoretical advice is. Of course, it doesn't work always that way. Sometimes our opponent, even if he's lower rated, sometimes he has a good day, is very well concentrated, and is perhaps very motivated because he's playing against you. So that rises his playing level. But let's have a look at the game move by move. It's a Sicilian defense, so e4, c5, knight c3. You choose for the closed Sicilian, so without d4. He plays knight to c6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, knight g to e2. This is all theory. d6, the standard setup for the dragon, the Sicilian dragon, with this strong bishop that controls the dark squares in the center. You castle kingside, and now he plays e6, and you play d3, knight g to e7, and now bishop to e3. Bishop g5 is also possible in this position, but bishop e3 is definitely a good move. He continues now with castle kingside, and you play queen to d2. So your plan is clear. You want to play bishop to h6 and trade the dark square bishops. Now here comes an interesting moment, because he plays knight to d4, and you continue with immediately bishop to h6, and in your own commentary you write that you did see at this point that your opponent could win a pawn with bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, and knight takes c2. You thought that you would have enough compensation with your pieces nicely placed for a kingside attack, and you wonder if this is a correct assessment or not. Now in the game your opponent didn't take the bishop, he played knight e to c6, but let's have a look at this idea of bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, knight takes e2, attacking the rook on a1. Rook c1 is the most logical reply, and now this knight must move either to d4 or b4. Let's say he plays knight to d4, placing it in the center. Now here, if we take, then c takes, of course. The knight on c3 is attacked, and I'm not very sure if you have enough compensation here. I think you do, since his pawns are doubled, and you can play knight to b5 with the idea of controlling c7, perhaps rook c7 as a following move. The only trouble is that if he plays queen to b6, now the knight on b5 is attacked, and if we move it away, b2 is hanging, so it's not that clear. Perhaps a4 is an idea, or perhaps rook c7. No, you're going to play rook c7, queen takes b5, rook takes e7. Is that something? No, then d3 drops. So this is not going very well. I think that after, let me go here, after knight to d4, perhaps it's not good to take here, but to play f4 maybe it's better. Just go for the kingside attack immediately. And if you want to push f5 after this, you will have to prepare it with g4. So let's say that he places his knight on c6, supporting his other knight. Now you could go g4, preparing to play f5. If he allows you to play f5, then you're fine with white. It's not easy for white to get a knight on g5. That would be wonderful, of course. If we would have a knight on g5, then the mate threat would be deadly, but it's not easy to get a knight there so easily. So we need to have this plan of playing f5. Now black can prevent this by playing f5 himself. And at this point, I'm not sure if white has enough compensation, because it seems like the attack on the king side is being stopped by this f5 move. One idea could be here to take with the e-pawn. E takes f5, opening this nice diagonal for the bishop. And if your opponent takes back with the e-pawn, then he gives you the d5 square. Also, to solve this slight problem here, you can play g5. So he doesn't have the option of freeing this with f takes g4 and then having the f5 square for his knight or for his bishop. So you close it here, and then you have the control over d5. So this looks like a nice position. You are pawn behind, but his king's defense is kind of open, so I think white has chances. And definitely in a game that we play, we cannot predict everything, and sometimes we just need to use our intuition to just sometimes takes some risk and try something. Another idea, by the way, on this d5 square is, of course, knight d5, knight f6 check. That's an interesting line. The 7th rank can be well defended by black. He can play rook f7 at some point to have h7 and g7 well defended. So it's not that clear that the attack of white will be successful, but it's an interesting and definitely playable variation. Now let's return to the game, because your opponent didn't take on h6. He was cautious and he played knight from e7 to c6. Now you took on g7, he took back, and here you played f4. Clear idea to win space on the king side. You got rid of this dark square bishop, and he continues developing bishop d7. And now you play knight to d1. By the way, another idea would have been, let's just go back before this bishop trade, before the bishop move. You could here in this position, instead of playing bishop to h6 right now, you could also play knight to d1 and just turn the moves around. So after this, you can play c3, and after the knight moves or is traded, then prepare with queen d2, bishop h6 again. That might be an idea. For example, let's see, bishop d7, c3 takes back, bishop c6 to place the bishop on a beautiful diagonal there, and then queen d2, preparing bishop to h6. Maybe you thought that he could have this maneuver of rook e8 and bishop h8 to prevent the trade of dark square bishops, so that's perhaps the reason why you decided to play bishop h6 immediately. I don't know, but this is another interesting line. Let's see how the game continued. Takes, f4, bishop d7, and now knight to d1. So we have this position. You are preparing to play c3 to kick this dark knight on this black knight from d4. Queen to e7, knight e3, nice square for the knight, much more active than on c3. And now he plays f5. And here you write some commentary. You write that you think that this is a good move for black, since he gets good chances. If he had not played this move, then you eventually would have advance your kingside pawns, and I think that's a correct statement. F5 is a good defensive move for him. Now what to do here? You play c3 according to your plan. He takes on e2, you take back, and then he plays rook a to e8. Here you go back with your queen to d2. I don't know, perhaps you were thinking about playing d4, and that was perhaps the reason of this queen to d2. Perhaps also you could play, your idea was to play rook a to d1 or rook a to e1. Yeah, well, I find that in this position white has quite a nice situation. I mean, you are well developed, your center is strong, you have a weakness created here on d6. So here already a plan like knight to c4 arises, or knight c4 and then followed by e5. So if he advances d5, you can play knight d6, and if he takes on e5, then you could take back with a pawn, preparing knight d6. Now the problem is that then this pawn on e5 is not defended, so that's why I have some doubts about queen d2. If the queen, let me go back one move, if the queen is on e2, then after knight c4 and e5, the queen is defending e5, so perhaps it's a good idea to keep the queen here on e2, I was thinking. What happens if you play knight immediately to c4? Well, you can play b5, of course, immediately. So, okay, so we would need to play a4 first. Okay, perhaps this idea that I had of knight to c2 cannot be executed immediately. But later it was possible. Let's see, queen d2, king to g8, rook a to d1, queen f7. Now this is the moment, because now the pawn on d6 is not defended. That means that you can play here knight c4. You played in the game a3, but knight c4 here is with the tempo, because he needs to defend d6. So he needs to go back with the queen to e7. And now you can play e5. If he takes, you take back. And then we would need to play later queen e3 followed by knight d6. Queen e3 to defend e5. Can he play b5 right now, or do we simply enter on d6? Yeah, we enter on d6 now, because the rook is attacked. So he needs to move the rook, and after the rook has gone, then queen e3 defends e5 and attacks c5. And here you have a wonderful knight there. That's a monster. So this would have been a good moment to play this knight c4 idea, winning a tempo. So he cannot play b5 to chase it away. Let's continue with the game. You played a3. Your plan is different. Your plan is to play b4. Also, of course, a good plan. He plays a6 and then you go b4. Now c takes b4, and here comes again some commentary on your side. You think that this was a mistake because he needed his pawn on c5 to control the center, to defend the center. And you thought that maybe he should play b6 instead of that. Well, I think that's not possible, because if he plays b6, then he has two undefended pawns on b6 and d6. So now knight c4 is very strong. You simply win a pawn here. After defense, you take here, and then you go back to c4 and get the same threats as before, and this is simply winning a pawn without much compensation for black. So b6 is not possible, but let's have a look if something else than c takes b4 was possible, because it's true, I do agree that this pawn on c5 is useful to prevent eventually d4, or in any way to have some influence in the center. But what else to do with black? It's not easy to find a good plan here. Actually, black's position is quite cramped. He doesn't have much space, his bishop is not alive, his knight doesn't have good places. This f-file is not going to be opened, he cannot use it. So what to do here with black? Perhaps he should try b5, or perhaps prepare. No, I cannot prepare. I was thinking about either d5 or e5, but that's not really possible now. I mean, because if he plays e5, then he weakens this d5 square, so your knight can jump in. And if he plays d5, then you can take here. So that's losing a pawn. So he would need to prepare d5 somehow. Well, knight e7 doesn't really look very attractive. Besides that, then you have knight c4. So this queen move, queen f7, was a wrong move. Now he doesn't have much possibilities. So he took here, you took back, you went rook to d8, so preparing to defend d6. And now you advance your central pawn, d4. He doesn't have much maneuvering space. He plays knight to e7. And here you write that, well, you played e takes f5, but you think that perhaps rook f to e1 or pawn to c4 would have been better. Well, let's have a look, because I'm not sure about c4. Let's see, if you play c4 here, and can he play d5? No. Perhaps taking, bishop takes, and now he has the f5 square for his knight. That would be his idea. So this looks quite nice for black if he gets this f5 square. So in that sense, it's useful to take on f5 like you did. Now let's see, how about this other move? Rook f to e1, that's your other alternative. And now if he takes here, takes. Oh, wait a minute, he cannot jump to f5 right now because b7 is hanging. Oh, was that in the previous variation the same or not? Let me return after c4. Takes, knight f5. Here bishop takes. b7, is that possible? Or bishop? No, bishop a4 then, of course. The same, yeah, this trick there. So, okay, so you cannot take on b7. Is that true? Is that true? Bishop takes b7, bishop a4, rook a1, attacking the bishop. So if he takes on b7, you take on a4. This looks beautiful for white. Nice a-file, weakness on a6. Two weaknesses here. This is good for white, yeah. So that means that after here bishop takes e4, he should not play knight f5, but he could play d5 first to block this diagonal. After takes, the bishop must move away to g2 or f3, and then he can play knight 5. No, this is undefended then. So he needs to play bishop c6, but then you get knight g4. You can get knight g4, knight e5 in, and this is a potential weakness later in the game. In the end game, this is going to be a weakness because of the two light square bishops. And your knight will be very beautifully placed there on e5. Yeah, this is indeed good for white. So c4 looks definitely interesting. And I think the consequences of rook to e1 are more or less the same. More or less the same. F takes e, bishop takes d5, bishop g2. Same idea as before. And now, well, actually we have the same position but with the pawn on c3 instead of on c4. Well, that makes d5 less a weakness. We still can play knight g4 to jump here on d5. Let's see if it takes here. Oh, sorry, no, here. We have winning a queen there, so he cannot take. He must defend first, so knight f5 to prevent knight h6. Now we need to move away the rook, rook a1, bishop returns, and then you can enter with the knight on e5. And you have a good position again. So both moves are good, c4 and rook e1 indeed. Now let's see what happened in the game. You took here, and then he took with the knight, and here came a blunder. You took on b7. This is, yeah, you explain it here how it happened. Your opponent was very short on time, and you thought that well, you got very confident, and you thought that he would make a mistake sooner or later, and you completely missed this tactical idea that after bishop takes b7, he trades this knight and then plays bishop to b5. Now the sad thing is that you blunder again here, because you save your rook f2 e1, and then you lose a complete piece on b7. But if you would retreat this bishop simply to g2, then it would be only an exchange that you lose. And I don't understand why you didn't do this, because you do have enough compensation here, since it has here a very weak pawn on a6. You can play rook a1 after this to attack it twice, and you can play queen e2 to attack it 3 times, and then the queen is attacking e6 and a6. So I have the feeling that he's going to lose one of those pawns. If he loses the a6 pawn, then you have a very nice passed b pawn. So I would play on here with white. This is an exchange, but you have compensation. And now the thing is that after this, and he took here, he had so little time that he decided to offer you a draw, and you accepted, and I would have accepted as well here, because now the material imbalance is just too big. Afterwards you talked with your opponent about the game, and you were both it was clear that he had a winning position here. Even if you take here on e6 with check, then still it's won for black. You can play queen f7 simply, and then he's a piece up. He controls the light squares, and it's actually won for black. Yeah. So let's say because of his time trouble, he took simply the half point, and you were both well, he was happy for the half point that he got, and you were happy because not losing this game after this blunder. And if we ask ourselves now, why did you lose this game? I think that it has to do with this psychological part of having the idea that your opponent is a weaker player, so that you are going to win anyway somehow, and then you lose concentration That's the cause of this blunder by taking on b7 and then moving rook f2 e1. Actually, sometimes it helps that whoever your opponent is, you imagine that your opponent is a grandmaster. And that sharpens your vision. If you imagine that your opponent is a grandmaster, you are going to pay attention every move, every moment of the game from beginning to end. And that's perhaps a mindset that can be helpful. Always imagine you're playing against a very strong opponent. Another thing that can help you to get the right mindset is to play as if it's your very last game in your life. You're never going to play chess again. This is the last game that you're going to play, and you want to play as good as possible because of that. Sometimes it helps. These are just some tricks to get the right complete concentration during a chess game. Now, chess, technically spoken, the interesting thing is this weakness on d6 and the idea of playing knight to c4. Let me go back to that point. Where was it? It was somewhere after queen f7, right here. So here he played queen f7, d6 is undefended, so now knight c4 is the right move to make. I was already, before this, I was eyeing at this knight c4 and e5 idea, but now you can win. You can play this with winning a tempo on d6. So actually constantly ask yourself, what are the weaknesses in the pawn structure of my opponent that can give you the idea of playing the right move. Alright, Brian, I'm going to say goodbye now. I hope this time the video is well synchronized, the image and the sound, because otherwise I'm in trouble. Okay, thanks for watching. I wish you lots of success in the rest of the games and your future chess career. And well, I'll say goodbye, just bye-bye. Thanks.